Hello, friendly neighborhood nerds. This one's a bit long, so check out the timestamps in the description below. Judah and Joshua Dysart not only get into the ethics and morality of Toyo Harada, they're also going to speak at length on social and political issues. So check it out if that's something you like. If you do like it, don't forget to click like, subscribe, and share with your friends.
What's up, friendly neighborhood nerds? This is your friend, Judah, and today I am bringing you a unique and special episode. We are joined by writer Joshua Dysart, who has written many amazing things, but today we will be discussing and hopefully resolving the underlying moral questions contained within his Toyo Harada saga, set in the Valiant Entertainment universe. This discussion will draw from Harbinger, Harbinger Wars, Harbinger Omegas, Imperium, The Life and Death of Toyo Harada, which are all written by Joshua, and may also reference related stories such as Divinity, Bloodshot Hardcore, and more, many of which have been written by other writers. Joshua's valiant work is important literature. This will not be a typical interview where we ask about the process and stuff like that. Our goal is to attack the substance within the text, discuss and possibly even debate the moral ramifications. The subject matter that we are about to discuss will most likely be philosophical, ethical, and political in nature. That is by design. These are heavy subjects, and in order to pay them the respect they deserve, we will not be pulling any punches or holding back. Joshua has been on our show before, and he's also one of my favorite writers of fiction. So this is sure to be a lively discussion and will be the definitive and quintessential YouTube episode regarding these stories. So without further ado, welcome to the program, Joshua Dysart.
Thanks. That is a terrifying intro. I have no idea if I can hold up my part of the bargain or of that promise, but I will do my best.
When I was writing that, I was thinking this does kind of imply like a sense of foreboding doom to follow.
It does, particularly the resolving of the issues. That's a big one. That's a big one. But I appreciate it. That's a very aggrandizing introduction. I love it. Thank you.
So I'm gonna ease you into this. So okay. This first line of discussion I've labeled softballs. So
nice. This is where I live.
Right.
Softball questions.
Starting with kind of just a general question. Joshua, do the ends ever justify the means? And if so, under what circumstances? At what point did Toyo Harada cross the line?
That's the softball question, huh? Do ends justify the means? Rock on. I think that no ethical equation is fully written until you've taken into account both the short-term and long-term human cost or violence. So, for instance, we desperately need in this country to move away from fossil fuels. In my country, as a power source or energy policy, energy economy, at the same time, and so the long-term is incalculable. The long-term benefits of moving away from that policy and the human lives it will impact is you can't even calculate that. But in the short term, if we do it too quickly, then we cause a degree of economic violence to certain parts of the country where these carbon economics are still very much in play, right? So the debate is complicated and difficult at that point. I don't know the answer to that. Your first softball question, I'm dodging. So that's how this is going to go. I don't know if the ends justify the means. For me personally, and my internal ethical equation, because the future is so uncertain, it's still very important to try to avoid immediate violence, no matter how economic violence, social violence, physical violence, no matter how much you think it will pay off in the long run, right? So I think that every time Harada decides to take a human life in the interest of a better future, to my mind, he has crossed the line because he doesn't necessarily deliver all the time. Maybe he will eventually, but he fails, he makes mistakes. So it's very difficult to assume a sort of like an all-knowing perspective on the future. When our flashlight on the future is so narrow and dim, we really don't know, does it take a Hitler to unify Europe? We really don't know what is the positive and negative reactions to things that feel immediately positive and negative in our moment. So that's one of the things that we try to explore with Toyo Harada, is the really complicated nature of knowing what is best and performing what is authentically 100% an ethical action.
So it's like it's almost like a complex algorithm where one value is harm, long-term harm, and one is confidence in a better outcome, compounded with harm caused in the short term to achieve the goal.
Yeah, exactly. And we don't know. I mean, obviously we have to bend towards progress, but we have no idea what that really means ultimately.
Do you think there is a hard line that we just don't know? Like a airtight, taking all factors into account, sort of algorithm to lean on kind of a stupid colloquialism, how many eggs we can or should break in order to achieve peace or goodness?
No, I don't think there's any way to know that. We haven't created a math to determine to truly determine the future. I think it's too complicated. So the best we can do is really try to mitigate as much social and economic violence right now that we can, and hope for the best. But this is this is why we had in our story, because obviously this is like a fantastic take on these sorts on themes of ethics and morality and how we govern ourselves. But this is why we had like a psychic who can perceive the future in the Bleeding Monk as part of our narrative, right? Because we were trying to solve how can we make this as close to a perfect attempt at utopia as we can in our comic book, fantasy sci-fi setting, and yet still show how complicated and seemingly impossible it is. So he has the benefit of super technologies that we don't have, and he has the benefit of a precognitive, which we obviously don't have. So I'm trying to mitigate these things that make our vision of a future easier, and yet it's still impossible. It still doesn't. Yeah.
So I think that's a kind of a good lead into the next sort of discussion point, is what responsibilities does a person with Harada's power have? And when should they intervene, and when should they exercise restraint?
Yeah, this is a really interesting, I think it's apparent to me, and this is a really exciting discussion to have. It's apparent to me that a lot of the questions we're going to be trying to tackle here are what the work was like really running at, and so that means I don't necessarily have an answer to any of them. The work was the attempt to figure this stuff out. But
Sorry, I feel like I'm asking you for the answers.
I know I don't have them, or I would have probably put it in the work. But I think that the philosophy that my struggle with that question is really seen in the different philosophies between Harada and Peter, right? Like by the end of my run, Peter has determined that with great power comes the need to absolutely sever yourself from the human experience, because no matter what you do, you're
cause harm.
Something up. Yeah, exactly. You're going to cause harm. Like there's no way, particularly in relation to what we're just talking about in the previous question, right? Like you're either causing harm in the short term, or you're causing harm in the long term, but there's just no way to predict the harm that you'll cause, no matter what your intentions. And then Harada is the opposite. You are responsible. You must take action, and you must. And if that means becoming the villain, if that means causing short-term harm for long-term incalculable gain, then that's what you have to do. And that's really what those two characters are. That's the sort of fictional discussion.
They're both so reductive. Regarding that, because it's to Harada, it's just a ledger. It's a ledger, and when you get to the bottom of that ledger, if that number is enough peace, then everything was worth it.
Yes.
And,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And that comes from the fact that he's ultimately alienated from the human experience. I mean, he tries to have human experiences, but you just can't have that much power and not be alienated from the human experience. And Peter, you could argue, is like too human, too flawed, too young, too much an addict, too much and so he feels so much, and Harada sort of kind of has to try to feel sometimes, and I think that, and that drives their philosophies, obviously.
Right. And you brought up Peter. He made one terrible mistake, and that scared him from ever changing the world again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of us, I don't mean to speak for anybody, but as an older man, I think I certainly have things in my past that were driven by like some kind of like male ego, whatever qualifier we want to use, like white male cis het, it doesn't matter, but it was driven by a personal self-indulgence and a
Hubris,
lack of
maybe?
awareness about my own hubris, but just not being aware of my privilege, to use the language of the moment, because having the privilege to become aware of my privilege by other people force educating it to me, instead of having the world like teach me racism. I have to like go out and things like that. And Peter is a little bit in that situation, but also but he's also like much more deeply broken, so it's a little bit harder for him to be introspective. He didn't have familial love. He did, all the things that we now realize are a big part of creating a foundationally introspective human being. Peter didn't have. So so he performs this act as a young man, and he's introspective enough to be horrified by it. And you're right, that completely changes his dynamics to power, into privilege, into his relationship with what he can and cannot do, or what he should and should not do.
And it's interesting because neither of them really have the right approach. They have extreme approaches that are heavily flawed. Do you think that knowledge has no significance unless it's... Oh yeah, that is why right.
Two
sorry.
rational people who are like looking for a fluid middle ground are not gonna, have a superhero battle above the skyline of some major city. Yeah.
They might try something radical like talking and exchanging ideas.
Yeah, exactly. Putting together a think tank. Yeah.
Right. So let me ask you this, Joshua. Does knowledge have no significance unless it's transformative?
I don't know. I do know that when I wrote that line, it felt true. I don't know. Probably, right? I mean, what is? I don't even know what sentience is. Like, not even knowledge, just like sentience. Like, what are we even? Are we like a fluke? Are we like a piece of mold who started thinking and suddenly we put all this importance on what we think and what we build, and it's really ultimately meaningless and it achieves nothing and it foundationally changes nothing? Yeah, I don't know.
I think you sort of attempted to answer that, especially in Life and Death, where I really got the impression that it was almost like a Lovecraftian horror. Reality is just a Lovecraftian horror where we really have zero significance. Yes. Our choices have zero significance, and the world is cold and uncaring.
Yeah,
like Angela Vessel.
Always. Yeah, exactly. There's always a thread of that in all of my work. Not necessarily because I believe that, but I certainly don't not believe that. So, you know what I mean? And I think, when I'm trying to use this pulp stuff to get at something true about the human experience. So I don't think I can fully map that with these stories unless there's that sort of cosmological horror, that's the sort of fear of being meaningless and nothing in the face of just infinite time, infinite space.
It's terrifying. I think that's why
it is.
It's why we have all these human constructs to protect ourselves from that realization.
100%, absolutely, yeah.
So those were the softballs, Joshua.
Nice. Awesome. Well, let's see how it goes through here.
Okay, we're gonna get into some of this other stuff. Rising Spirit and Toyo Harada resemble the extreme amoral version of late-stage profiteering capitalist objectivism, which is Rising Spirit, versus the extreme form of leftist collectivism that forsakes the individual in favor of the whole, that's Toyo Harada's foundation. Are those equal but opposite evils, in your opinion? Are you advocating for centrism when portraying both sides as destructive?
Well, I certainly don't. Man, I mean, you know, a lot of these, I'm going to answer all these the same way. I don't know. I don't think, I mean, I spotted the problem, but I didn't solve it. I certainly fear centricism as well. You know, if we were to create a character that is like just slightly left or right of center on this particular vector, that I'd come up with 1,000 ways in which that didn't work either, you know? So I don't know. I mean, I think the problem here, of course, is that, outside of asking the question, I don't know the answers. I mean, I think that certainly Rising Spirit, their dedication to profit is absolutely evil, foundationally. There's no fluidity in their ideology, right? That's less the case with Harada, because a dedication to human betterment, no matter how much you get it wrong, is at least coming from a place of, you know, at least it's coming from a place of altruism. Like, he's ultimately an altruistic character, whereas I don't think Rising Spirit is. Perhaps someone could find a way to cast capitalism as altruism. We've certainly seen economic.
I mean, it's Ayn Rand. It's the Ayn Rand perspective that the inherent selfishness of Rising Spirit is actually a virtue, right. And that as human beings, that is the path to the most prosperity for. Right.
That ultimately, exactly. And I mean, I personally think the history of the 20th century has revealed that to be bullshit.
Right.
But I guess some people buy into it still. But so at least Harada is coming from an altruistic place. So I think centricism is dangerous because, you know, we're having a big talk in the United States right now about coming to the center and working together again and all this stuff. And I must admit that I long for a sort of spectrum of a civil conversation in our politics, but at the same time, centricism brought us every war we got into. You know, the Democrats, the closest representation to a left that we supposedly have in this country, have repeatedly, again and again, moved to the center and really, and in doing so, not progressed us as fast as we should have gone on racial inequality and economic inequality and environmental justice. These things don't get taken care of in the center. So I certainly am not arguing for extremes. They're both ideologues, and ideologues are definitely the problem. Like, you're definitely, if you believe your ism is going to infallibly work, you're a problem. But I don't think the center is the answer either. I personally like to see things, you know, tend towards the left. But that's a person. Yeah.
So I think we're both left-leaning people. But I think where we might differ is the ultimate goal is, and I'm kind of we're gonna circle back to Toyo Harada, but just to kind of bring it to American politics.
Yeah.
Just speaking for myself, my ultimate goal is that the same as any progressive or leftist is that everyone has healthcare.
Yeah.
People work a full-time job and they can afford all of their needs. Everyone has access to high quality education. Everyone has bodily autonomy. People can love who they want. They have complete these are all the same goals. I'm drawn to centrism only in the sense that it seems like taking all of human nature into account, the most viable way to achieve any of those objectives, or at least
Mhm.
partially achieve those objectives. And I'm nervous when it comes to leftist approach, more progressive approach, because it what I'm afraid of is an end state where any progressives are in such a small minority, or there's such a strong partisan gridlock that none of those things even begin.
Sure. Yeah, of course. And look, and when we speak on the center, we are talking about a moving target, like a fluid moving target. As society shifts, the center politics in Europe in 1930 would be drastically different than central politics, in the United States now. So, and I have a great sympathy for that, your argument, and it's only recently that I have begun to entertain this idea that centrism has, not that it hasn't caused any progress, it certainly has, but that we are in a unique situation now, particularly with environmental justice, where we seem to, for the first time, really have a time clock. Now, you would argue, I would say, the Black experience in the South in the 1950s, those people would say, we have a time clock, you know what I mean? Like on equality. But now we have this global time clock, which is our total environmental breakdown and a global realignment of power dynamics due to weather, right? So for the first time, it feels like the very slow, clumsy, but possibly always forward-moving centric position might not get us through the environmental bottleneck, assuming we haven't already completely failed at that.
Well,
so I'm starting to become, I'm not, when I started writing Toyo Harada, I was definitely I was a left of Lenin, but believed in centrist, in sort of just in the entire political conversation, everyone having a voice. It's important for certain voices to be at the table that are opposite of yours. It's never good when a single ideology is in control of the entire governmental response to anything. But I think that maybe it's Trumpism, we could analyze why, but I think that I'm beginning to become slightly more radically left as the world turns.
And I've heard one thing. Robo, he's not here, and he's gonna be very disappointed that he missed this, because he loves talking about this stuff too.
Yeah, bummed to miss
but,
it.
But one thing that he said that I agree with, that I thought was pretty compelling, is that, like you said, the center is not fluid, and right now our right is dragging our center so far that it doesn't even look like a center anymore. Because when I conceptualize a center, I'm thinking normal leftists, normal conservatives that just don't want to pay as many taxes and think trickle down works.
Yeah, fiscal conservatives.
Yeah, these two, what I would say, normal but opposing groups, and then like whatever the fuck is happening way over here now.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I am not an educated enough sociologist to discuss exactly all the permutation to turn in a thesis on Trumpism. Like it's so difficult for me to grasp. But I agree. And look, a perfect example is this: because we're a two-party system in this country, that means we got to pack all the left identifying people into the Democratic Party, right? You can be in the Green Party or whatever, but you're not having any political impact if you do that. Or if you are, you're actually negating any progress on the left. So, but now here we are, we're all stuck in this huge tent together between, extreme progressives, youth leftists, which are, the young people I think the newest generation has a really interesting value system that I respect, and they've got, if they want to be a part of an established party, then they've got to be a part of the Democratic Party. And the Democratic Party's tent also now includes the Lincoln Project, which these are terrible people. These are, there are people in the Lincoln Project who have railed against homosexuality, who have And so here we are, we're all in bed together. And that's going to be a lasting impact of of this administration is how it dragged us to the right. Dragged the whole spectrum, to the right.
It's really fascinating, especially thinking about
it is,
like it's really the failure of you talk going back to Imperium and Harbinger and Imperium. We're always gonna be what's the word I'm looking for? It's always gonna be a fallacy when we divide all this complex ideology into option A and option B. And we have this self-imposed option A and option B with our two-party system, and it's just not nuanced enough for our society. So it's definitely something. I mean, I think Europe, and I'm not as educated on European politics as I should be, but I know that they have coalitions, but still individual parties representing individual values and priorities. And it would be, I don't see how this country is going to improve from the problem that we just discussed without, at the very least, coming up with a way to dissolve the two-party system.
I mean, I have many friends who live under parliamentary governance, and they bitch about that too. So I'm sure, the grass is always greener, right? But I mean, from my point of view, a parliamentary system is not a winner-take-all system. So if the Party for Disabled Rights gets 5% of the vote, then theoretically they have 5% representation in a parliamentary system. We are a winner. Not only are we winner take all here, but with some variation between the House and the Senate. There's like a few checks and balances, but compared to the nuances of a parliamentary system, it's
not enough.
Yeah, it's not enough. And so not only are we winner take all, but on top of that, we have the Electoral College, which is the ultimate winner take all thing, and in which has us in a situation now where you got 3 battleground states that are the only states really that get spoken to at this time in our electoral cycle, which is penultimate days before the election. They're the only people who get catered to. They're a minority of the country, and because we're the United States and because of our military industrial might, they are going to pick the person who's going to help dictate global policy. You got a very small group of people in like Pennsylvania and like Ohio. Those people are deciding the fate of the world. It's crazy. It's a completely fucked system. So I mean, I think we really need to stop. I still use the word democracy in relation to the United States governance system, but I'm not sure it's an accurate term at all. I think I use it out of romantics, but I don't see this as being really a modern democracy.
Definitely not 100% representative. Or even 50%. So
I mean, wasn't it? It's like 20% of the voting population elected President Trump in 2016. I mean, I think I think I'm giving him a few percentage points.
So we're gonna kind of shift gears a little bit.
That was it. Sorry.
No, don't be sorry. I love it. So my favorite characters in Imperium is your supporting cast of monsters that are attached to Toyo Harada.
I love monsters. I love writing monsters.
Well, you have a very interesting sort of juxtaposition here between Mech Major and the Angela vessel, also known as Broken Angel, although I think she's only called that once or twice in the story. Usually referred to as Angela vessel. Yeah. Which, by the way, is a fucking horrifying character. But anyway, awesome. At first,
I love her.
I really, it was like, I was impressed by how disturbed I was by this character. But,
awesome.
So I thought these characters represented kind of like logical empathy versus logical indifference. And the question that raises is logic and reason inherently either of those things? Or does kindness exist separately from reason? And I would argue that kindness is a function of reason, but it runs deeper than that. I was sort of pondering the nature of empathy, and it occurred to me that empathy is socially inward. It is a logical concept because by relating to our species, we perpetuate our species, but outward empathy is less logical. Any empathy that Broken Angel could feel for a human being would be outward empathy, which runs in contrast to Mech Major, who views their self as the child of man or woman, the child of humanity, making their empathy at least somewhat inward. In Life and Death, Albert Einstein describes how Toyo is so powerful that he no longer relates to the suffering of mere mortals at all. Do you believe that? Sorry, this is such a long question. Do you believe that power naturally negates empathy? And do you think that empathy is logical?
I think there's a couple of points made in that question, and I'll work backwards. I do think power naturally negates empathy. Yes. And that is why I'm so distrustful of it. And it is very, very difficult to maintain pure empathy when you have power. This is why a foundational part of almost every human mystical movement throughout our history has involved pledges of poverty. Monks who only own a bowl for someone to put rice in, things like that, because I think there is an understanding that to love everything, you have to be powerless. Because once you begin to have power, you will use the means of power to stay in power. And social dynamics are just too fluid for you to maintain power without actively maintaining power. So yes. Now, you also said something that I believe, to whatever degree of certainty I believe anything, it is the idea that that ethics or reason will ultimately include kindness as a function of that. And I 100% agree. And that's why a character like Mech Major is or Sunlight on Snow is a truer representation of my philosophy, whereas the Angela vessel is just a slight bend in what I really believe, so that I can have an effective villain. Just a touch, you know what I mean? Like a
Right.
10% more of a cold. And you're right, assuming I understand what you mean by like inward empathy and outward empathy, assuming I'm tracking you, you're right in that I get away with it because she's an alien consciousness, right? So there's this sort of like, do you have empathy for the ants kind of thing? Like,
Right.
so that allows me to get away with it. But I think if we're really talking about personal philosophies, I believe that a machine, be it a human mind or a mechanized machine or any construct, any thinking construct that that is completely logical, which the human mind is not, no animalistic urges or emotions, complete logic will ultimately tend towards ethics and kindness, because it is the most productive way for society to grow. Like everything that a conservative, right-leaning person wants from society is the same thing that a left progressive person wants from society ultimately, theoretically, which is that we are all equal, safe, and represented. And I think pure logic, like I do believe, like I don't buy in. This is where Mech Major comes from. This idea that artificial intelligence is ultimately terrifying. When I find true GAI, which we'll probably never achieve, true GAI, I think would be the most ethical, model. So yeah, I do. I think kindness is a product of reason. Yeah.
Sweet. That's a solid answer. Awesome.
Yeah, that's it. That's my first real answer. Yes.
That's great.
I do.
I love it.
And and I don't think I could have written Angela as anything other than an alien consciousness. She couldn't have been man-made like Mech Major. She couldn't have been, because I can't imagine a human mind without. I can imagine flawed, of course, ambitious, cruel.
Well,
but
she's not malicious. Like if
Yes,
you pay attention
exactly.
to her, and except for when she gets really pissed at Toyo later on, when she says that he will.
Yes.
What did she say? His suffering will know no bounds, or something like that.
Yes. Like
It will be
she's-
profound.
Yeah. She's still a thinking organism somewhere out there. She's still, there is an emotional response. Even Spock smiled 4 times in the original Star Trek episode. Even the most reasoned are affected by emotion.
But she really serves so many functions in this story. She I think probably lays it out the best as far as Toyo's compromises go. The moral compromise that he makes by providing her with pregnant women to experiment on. I was shocked that he did that. I thought that was a line that he would never cross. But she just lays it out. Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
She unemotionally lays it out. This is what I need in order for me to do this thing for all of humanity, and this is the choice. And he just, again, the ledger. He just goes back to the ledger. He's like, greater good for humanity. All right. Well, I guess that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, but as we see in Life and Death, it becomes an intention of scale, right? Like he's many times said he will not participate in Megadeth. So he'll never facilitate an atomic exchange. He'll never, and I think we see, and there's a lot of other things happening in Life and Death. The fact that I hope it's very subtly played, but he's becoming a father himself. He has a past experience of becoming a father with the son who died in a very, as revealed in that series. And I, so there's some emotional impact that's like stirring in him, but also ultimately it's an issue of scale. Like Harada will kill a person here, kill a person there, he'll tip the scales, but when she asks for an entire factory,
200.
yeah, and they're probably rotating. So over the long haul, who knows how many women she would need to get to some profound understanding of how this particular species propagates. That's just, it's too much. I mean, an occasional pregnant woman, is one thing, but scale is, he is sensitive to scale, to the scale of his atrocities.
Do you think she's evil?
Well, I mean, I don't really believe in evil, and I think that shows in my work. Like, you never see anyone who's like foundationally just evil for evil's sake. So, I can answer that. I mean, I guess my answer is evil doesn't exist. So no, but it is as pretty much as close as I have written someone that we would define as evil. You know what I mean?
And yet, in a way, she's really, I mean, really no more evil than we are when you look at like termites or ants, or like you mentioned. Sure. The way we have an entire section in the store full of poison and death traps for these insignificant living things that we've decided do not matter. So.
Yes, exactly. I mean, for all we know, the entity that is possessing the Angela vessel could one day crack the secret of life in the universe, what makes matter be animate or inanimate, and they could become a god that creates a whole new era of peace and prosperity. We don't fucking know, because again, our flashlight on the future is narrow and dim. But from this moment, this particular action she's taking certainly seems evil to us because we have a self-preservation mechanism that's like, right. Oh my God. But I mean, what is evil? We all have, we're talking on computers that use cobalt from cobalt mines and, and from the Congo, and the children dug out, for very little money and lived under horrible conditions. Like, what is evil? What is evil? Like, it's all evil.
It
Life
exists.
is evil.
It exists wherever there is a gap in wherever there is a blindness in empathy. At any time, we tolerate horrible things because they're out of our purview. We're able to, with our horse blinders, not see them. and that's how empathy is taken away from typically empathetic people or someone who gravitates. So
absolutely, it's really important for these G8 economies to keep us comfortable and blinded to exactly what goes into these economies, the kind of human cost that these economies,
backs they're built on.
Yeah. Super important that there be a wall around the world that separates those of us who get to more or less eat 3 meals a day and live in relative comfort from those people who live and die by fate every day, or live under bombs, or live under famine. So it's really important to capitalism to keep that wall intact, because it becomes more complicated, because ultimately the human animal does bend towards compassion. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Good stuff. So I had another question for you.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, it's cool. I just like the affect of that delivery. I mean, I think I had another question.
No. The reason that came off awkwardly is because we got another question about Peter Stanchik, but you already sort of just answered it earlier in the conversation. Already kind of addressed it. I'll read it to you anyway, just for the hell of it. But
okay.
We can cut it later if it's irrelevant. But so the question is, earlier in Harbinger, Peter Stanchik seems to represent the compassionate counterpoint to Harada's extreme utilitarian collectivism. But he was in no way representative of the society be damned objectivism of Kozel. That being said, he was deeply flawed enough to not be an obvious solution to either of them. So forgetting isms for a moment, how are we all supposed to act?
I mean, the beauty of Peter, right, is none of us really are flawless. We're all we're gonna do the best we can. We're gonna make mistakes. We're gonna hurt people. People hurt people. We're gonna hurt people unknowingly by simply being consumerists in a large consumerist society. We're gonna harm people, and we're going to more directly harm people. We're going to not be in love with people who are in love with us. We're going to be in love with people who aren't in love with us, and then we're gonna hurt them. We're gonna be in love with someone who is in love with us, and we're gonna hurt them. We're just gonna hurt each other. That's what people do, among other things. And so the only way to behave, I guess, and I'm certainly not qualified to say this, is to live your life, harm as few people as you possibly can, remain completely fluid about what harm means, and to learn when you realize you've hurt someone, to learn and try not, you're gonna hurt somebody else, just try not to hurt them the same way you hurt the last person. And you know what I mean? And because ultimately Peter is closer to someone who can evolve and change and grow, because he's learning, right? Harada doesn't really learn. He kind of does. He changes a little bit over but for the most part, he's going to keep making the huge play. It's in his character because of his power, and because he never really has deep personal implications for his mistakes. So he's going to always make these huge plays, and he's going to learn very little and change very little. Whereas Peter will evolve and grow a great deal. So in a way, Peter is the way to act or to be, because he
evolves.
He evolves. He harms people, and then he changes his behavior. And one of my favorite one-shots is from the Rob Venditti Book of Death series, which is the Death of Harbinger, which shows kind of everybody in this sort of post-Harada future. And Peter it's the only time I got to write a fully evolved, aware Peter. And he's a family man, and he's a good husband, he's a good father, and he's a good leader of the whole world. He's like a global leader. And he runs a massive institution that Harada started, and to me, that is the most ideal utopic end for a human life. Is I made mistakes and I became better, and I made with every year the lives of the people around me got better because I became a better person.
So try to be good with humility.
That's right. Try to be good and learn and just self-reflect, because you're just In in internal reflection is change and evolution and growth. Yeah.
The thing that just kind of in retrospect, thinking back on these things, yeah, there's a lot of things where the human brain is just not capable of coming up with an answer, like a satisfactory answer for. Best we can do is kind of just to continue to try to take these things apart, and not give up on trying to answer these questions. So
yeah, I mean, ultimately, this is the problem with isms, right? And maybe we've already touched this, but this is something I really think we're in this moment where we really locked into our isms in the 20th century. We were really like, you got to be a communist, you got to be a capitalist, you got to be, and now, and maybe that served a purpose. Sometimes these outdated models, even though they were ugly, sometimes they serve some purpose of order or something. Like maybe the Catholic Church kept Europe together during the Middle Ages, and now it's just a tired mechanism that no one needs anymore. But
maybe capitalism was the solution to feudalism that we needed
precisely.
At any given right.
Exactly. And certainly Marxist concepts and socialisme concepts have given us new ideas in ethical economics, but none of this stuff works solely on its own as equations, because human greed and human immorality infects every ism. And so we really need to get to this place where we stop thinking of an idea like capitalism or socialism as a concrete, like a chair that you don't. A capitalism isn't a chair that you sit on, and if you remove one leg and replace it with socialism, it'll collapse. We have to get past all this, and we have to be fluid, and we have to be self-aware of the moment that we're living in. This is the most difficult thing for humans, particularly in an aggregate society. I mean, I think individually we're a little bit better at it, but once we aggregate, it's a fucking nightmare. But like, to see where we are in the moment and to take the tool, the philosophical and economic tool we need in that moment to fix that moment, and understand that the next moment won't need the same tool. And it's the same as a person to stay fluid and to understand that each moment is going to need a different tool from you, and that the only guiding principle is compassion. Nothing else will get us through.
That doesn't fit on a bumper sticker, a meme, or a tweet though.
I know it doesn't. I'm a terrible bumper sticker maker, but that's what it is. Only compassion will see us through. It won't be, no, your ism will not save you. That's and so we need. There's so much about the 20th century we need to walk away from, and that's, I think, one of the key things we need to walk away from is these battles over isms or ideologies.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, but I also think about the human need for isms. Obviously. And that's a factor. So how do we negotiate what we ought to do with the realities of human nature? And that's,
I mean, there's a lot about human nature that we need to turn the page on. Obviously, I mean, at some point you just got to look at the amount of suffering we cause of one another and suggest that there's some pretty deep flaws, or I would say exploited bugs in the human program, in the human mind, So, I mean, that's the great question of our species will be, can we recode, or will these bugs take us down? And so I don't know, but yeah, you're right. It's easy to talk about and difficult to actuate.
The broken angel. Sorry, I'm going backwards. Broken angel. One thing that was kind of interesting about her is she's constantly talking about how weak humans are for having any concept of morality. How weak Toyo was for feeling bad for the pregnant women she wanted to mutilate, torture. She always portrayed that as a weakness, but when push came to shove, she had no allies. So she was.
I like that.
It was kind of interesting that yes, actually, the being kind has strategic value, and it's not just some flimsy sort of like thing that you do to make yourself feel good.
Yeah,
So
that's right. There's like this thing. I wish I could remember where this philosophy came from, but it's I think it's a cultural anthropologist who's Australian. His name escapes me now, but he wrote like a whole thesis on the mother love concept of evolution. That because the female raises the child, then the mother-child relationship becomes the defining moral construct, and that society aggregates around this notion of mother love, which is like the strongest
form of love.
Yeah. I mean, taking care of the weak, you know what I mean? Making sure that you're fed, so that these become foundational principles in the very earliest of societies. And it always goes up against realities of societies, like scarcity, scarcity issues and things like this, economic issues. But nonetheless, that ultimately the civilizations that embrace the mother love paradigm ultimately grow faster, find themselves more involved in larger communal management, and succeed over the long term. And that societies that trended more toward, let's say patriarchal love, that those societies don't survive. So to your point, but I think that's probably why Angela is like the closest thing to a real villain I may have ever written, because she is truly the other in a way nothing I've ever written is. She's from another dimension. She's not even from our like spatial spatial reality. So she's her
fucking scary, man.
Yeah. And it suggests honestly, in the same way that we have in the same way that quantum physics is somehow mysteriously different than Newtonian physics, right? And that we've not yet cracked how they both exist in the same time spatial plane. In that way, she has a kind of what I would argue is like an insectilian morality or something like that. Her moral construct in the place that she's from, it might be the most evolved moral construct.
That it's virtuous to learn. And that is the sole source of virtue, or whatever.
Yes, exactly. And to consume and to control, and to that knowledge that may be in if mold had politics, that might be it would be the politics of consumption, of growth. Whereas we're mammals, we're like we're a pack species. We need compassion for each other, or it doesn't work.
Toyo could have killed her like that at any point.
Yes.
Snapped his fingers and she died, but he refused to, because even though she was, by our standards, the epitome of evil, and even though he still felt like the greater good was that she was capable of cold fusion, or the space elevator, or these things that would have such a great impact on society, that her evil was worth it. And even when she was actively trying to destroy him, he still tolerated her because of that thing. And it's interesting, but it's also a point for Harada that he's consistent.
That's right. That speaks, right? That speaks to his that sort of speaks to his whole philosophy, right? The ends justifies the mean. Like, I'm going to keep her alive because the end goal is to get this tech that she can bring to our species that even I can't achieve. But ultimately, it's also Harada's great failing is his indefatigable defense of progress at all costs. And I think, one of the most complicated things we face is that there seems to be an inherent knot, a binding between violence and progress. I don't see the human species progressing without violence. Hopefully that can change, but Harada believes in progress more than he believes in ending violence. So that's his flaw.
And it can't help but make me think of the American left, especially like, you go very far to the left. You have people that are still going to vote for Bernie Sanders in November, this month,
Right.
next week. Yeah. I'm not this month, November, next month. But you have people that are that far left, and they talk about and I agree with pretty much everything on a moral and philosophical level with those people. But it also, I can't help but think, like, does this level of I don't want to say extremism because of the negative connotation, but does this level of commitment to these ideals, does that end in revolution? And is that something that should be like a violent revolution? And is that something that should be avoided in favor of the status quo because it's more peaceful? Mm-hmm. Or is that something that we should are those eggs that we should be willing to break?
Man, the recalibration of politics through violence is one of the most difficult discussions that we have about self-governance, because again, I know I keep saying this, but it's been on my mind a lot. Like, why are we stuck in 20th century thinking? Violent recalibration of politics was a big factor of the 20th century. We saw revolutions everywhere, particularly after World War II, when the whole global paradigm shifted because of the outcome of that war. So and a lot of those revolutions came from post-colonial, neo-colonial, or still colonized areas. And for the most part, those revolutions bore immediate fruit, but long-term growth complications, for the most part. And I have been fortunate enough in my life to go to a few places where politics has been used to attempt a political recalibration of those societies, and those societies are in total turmoil. It's when you turn to we turn to violence to recalibrate politics, it is a very hard reset on your society, assuming it's society-wide. I mean, one person trying to start a race war is just madness. But if you have an actual revolution, an actual violent revolution, it is a hard reset on your society. And I do not know, and I have thought about it a great deal. I do not know at what point that becomes your only option. I don't know when you make that choice, when you say, we're throwing it all out and we're turning to the gun.
If we're waiting for a sign, it's not going to come, because we're a frog in a boiling pot, a slowly boiling pot. And every time something gets crazier, and I can think of just unforgivably insane things that have happened in just the last 4 years, but anytime something gets just a little bit crazier, there's still room where we can look up and be like, well, at least it's not here. At least there's no, at least we're not gassing people, or at least, there's So
yeah. I mean, I think personally, just because of what I've seen in life and because of my personal ethical beliefs, I think that I ultimately, it would take a lot for me to pick up a gun against my government, because I still believe we have other channels for change that don't cause as much profound disruption as violence.
So maybe that's it. When those channels close, that's when it happens. That's scary, because we're gonna find out in less than a month.
I know, but also different groups have a different perspective on this, man. I mean, you could say it's not until they start jailing us for no reason, but you would have the Black American community be like, we feel
that's been happening.
Yeah, exactly. So this is it's a tyranny has a certain subjectivity to it. So I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to be as aware as possible that I have a different relationship to authority because of my privilege, and but I'm also trying to be aware that I want to, I don't know, when do you pick up arms? If Americans of color say it's time, I guess I'll just have to try to read it as best I can and see what's up.
Joshua, the answer is it's when they tell us to wear masks for our own safety.
Obviously.
These ass clowns.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Cool. Let me do my okay.
Shake it out.
Put on my Judah mask. Cool. Okay, well, folks, that was Joshua Dysart. If you watched this without ever reading Harbinger, ooh, cool sunglass guy over here. Yeah.
See that? I look like my shirt. It's Father John Misty. Go ahead, do it. I'm sorry, I fucked you up.
Nice. No, we're keeping that. If you haven't read Harbinger or Imperium or The Life and Death of Toyo Harada or any Joshua Dysart stuff, it's all been spoiled by this episode, which sucks for you, but you should still read it because it's awesome.
There's
it really
still
is.
lots of explosions and stuff. And
There are explosions. You said someone on Twitter told you that your stuff wasn't action-packed enough. Have they read your stuff? Like, do they?
I feel like I definitely like the slow burn. You know what I mean? Like I've definitely had the most common note I get when I turn in a first issue script to an editor is like, can we please get an action scene in here? It's the first issue, please. Because I definitely like to take my time, and I think that action, especially in comics where we have no motion and sound, action doesn't have impact unless you are invested in the characters who are in danger. So I try to that's mine. But yeah.
Action is boring without drama.
I think
drama.
So. Yeah.
Drama is what people want. I mean, people think they want action. What they really want is drama. And
that's right.
But
That's right.
anyway.
Yeah,
anyway,
I agree.
Read this guy's stuff. It's fucking awesome. It's the best. It's
nice.
the best.
Thank you.
You got to read it.
Awesome.
And anyway, thanks a lot for being here, and it was really good to have this conversation.
Yeah.
Surf's up, dude. Take care.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. It's always fun.
Wait. Before you turn it off, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for making it to the end. I also have a couple things to ask. First, don't forget to take your sexy ass to the description and find the links you need to support this creator. But almost as important, if you liked this video, smash that like and subscribe button while leaving us a comment telling us who you'd like us to interview in the future. Stay nerdy.